move this thing on. Shalom Aleichem, Malachi Asharet, Malachi Elyon, Mimelech, Malachi Hamelachim, Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Malachi Asharet, Malachi Elyon, Mimelech, Malachi Hamelachim, Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Malachi Hasharet, Malachi Elyon, Mimelech, Malachi Hamelachim, Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem l'shalom, Malachi Hashalom, Malachi Elyon, Mimelech, Malachi Hamelachim, Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Baruchuni l'shalom, Malachi Hashalom, Malachi Elyon, Mimelech, Malachi Hamelachim, Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Ayin zetchem l'shalom, Malachi Hashalom, Malachi Elyon, Mimelech, Malachi Hamelachim, Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Yanalai, 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 Good Shabbos. Hello. I want to invite you to sit up a little straighter, or look, if you're on a couch and sitting up straight is not available, sink in a little deeper. Breathe a little bit deeper. Shabbos, as we were gathering virtually, myself and Anna and Jordan and Seth, those of us sort of making tonight happen in the world of the internet behind the scenes, we were all sort of musing on how the energy of Purim is still very much like coursing through our veins. Like, I do not, despite my invitation for taking a deep breath, I do not feel relaxed right now. I still feel wired. Maybe just because it's been a week and we had a Jewish holiday in the middle of it, and so then on the tail end of a Jewish holiday, you're always trying to catch up on the stuff that you missed, and the stuff that you didn't get to while the holiday was going on, and it just feels like twice as much to do before coming into Shabbat. But also, it's Friday, Yom HaShishi. It is Friday, and it's hard to kind of land, like sort of descending into a soft, pillowy cushion on Friday afternoon into Shabbat. It's just so often not how it happens. I mean, just speaking personally, I'll let this Shruti box rest here as a metaphor for what we're all going for. So later in our stream tonight, I'm going to share a conversation I had with you earlier with the CEO of Hazon. the Jewish Lab for Sustainability. And it was a great conversation. I'm excited to share it with you. And one of the things we talked about was how the things that are transformational for ourselves as people, and certainly for societies, require preparation. They don't just happen, oh, we need to do this hard thing that's going to change everything. It doesn't just happen. You need to prepare for it. And Shabbat is supposed to be a transformational dimension of life. I'll say Jewish life because that's what I know, but for anybody who has a Sabbath as part of your, 1 out of every 7 days, take a day off, rest, sort of disengage from commerce and from productivity and from all of the things that make the world go the other 6 days. On this one day, be motivated by something else. Sort of get back in touch with your humanity, your basic humanity, that there's nothing that you need to be or do in order to earn the fact that you are alive, that you can sing, that you can pray, eat, all of the good stuff that comes along with being a human being and enjoying that, reveling in it, relishing it. But in order to do that on Shabbat, to really put that other stuff away, it takes more than the sun going down outside, right? The sun can go down outside, and it might be Shabbat out there, but unless in your own space, in my own space, I have pushed things to the side, stacked the books on top of each other and, sort of put them away, cleared the table, created a space for candlelight, poured a glass of wine or something else, juice, sat down, taken a few deep breaths. Unless I have done those things, Shabbat is not happening in here. And so, however you are arriving tonight, whether it's with the energy of Purim still buzzing inside of your veins, whether it's just the energy of the week still kind of reverberating, I want to invite you to arrive. And if you haven't prepared for a second before this moment, join me. Join me in making that shift of heart space, head space that allows us to actually do Shabbat, and in doing Shabbat to be a model for those around us that this is possible, it's possible. So sit a little more comfortably, but also so that you can take a deep breath. And go ahead and take a deep breath and let it out. Go ahead and do it again. And again. And as I'm speaking, go ahead and continue to just center yourself. Feel yourself in your chair, your feet resting on whatever surface they're resting on. Just feel your thighs, your tuchus, just resting, given its stability, however it is that you're sitting or lying. Your lungs just doing the work for you. You are being breathed. You don't have to work for it. It's a gift. So settle into accepting this gift. It's Shabbos. Go ahead and join me as we bless these candles, the candles that you want to light right now. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. Amen. So these words that we're going to hear and sing come from Isaiah. Say, like, go ahead, scheme your schemes, they will come to nothing. Make your plans, say the things you're going to say. They will not stand because God is with us. Ki Immanuel. I'm thinking about this tonight like a prayer for those who are under siege. As a prayer for those who are under siege. We read this prayer, we sing this prayer, usually around Purim, which of course we just came off of. During the Megillah reading, it was occurring to me in the pod I was sitting with, what must people in Ukraine, Jews in Ukraine, celebrating Purim tonight, make of the Megillah, make of the story of a people who defended themselves in the midst of an assault on their identity? What kind of courage must this story give people who need to be reminded that just because somebody is devising plans against you does not mean they will come to fruition? So we sing this tonight out of the spirit of Purim, which is the spirit of resistance to tyranny and evil.
Far dabru davar velo yakum dabru davar velo yakum ki Immanuel join me. Utsu etza vetuvar dabru davar velo yakum utsu etza vetuvar dabru davar velo yakum dabru davar velo yakum ki Immanuel, ki Immanuel.
Full-on real service. Honestly, I wanted to sing some songs, have a conversation with Jakir, tell you about him in a minute, make Kiddush, do Kaddish, do a healing prayer, call it a night. So that's what we're going to do. For those of you who are with us for the first time, welcome to Mishkan. If you haven't already introduced yourselves in the chat, go ahead, introduce yourself. I bet you already did. I bet I'm saying some stuff that you're already like, we did that already, which is great. And shared with each other where you are and how you are. And certainly if it is your first time here, welcome. You're at Mishkan. I mean, Mishkan is sort of wherever Mishkan is doing stuff, which tonight is in my home, in front of my bookshelf in my dining room. But tomorrow we'll be at JCYS, on Lawrence for Shabbat morning services. And next week we'll be at Second Unitarian on Friday night. And you can check our calendar for our Shabbat schedule of where we will be, whether online or in person or both. And we have, as usual, a lot going on. The best way to know what all the lot that is going on is is on our email because, well, I could say you should check our calendar, and you should check our calendar. In the email, it sort of lists things it just lists things in a way that might be easier for you to see what is happening and when. We have a small group 20 something Shabbat happening for 20 somethings on April 1st, Friday night. Rabbi Dina is teaching two different things. One, convening a baby group that is meeting for the first time next week. Build Your Village. It's a series for parents of like new parents or parents of babies. And so that's still open registration. And she's also teaching Eish Kodesh, examining the Eish Kodesh. It was also known as the Warsaw Ghetto Rabbi. If you happen to be free for an in-person class at 10 a.m. on Thursday or 10:30 a.m. on Thursday mornings. Rabbi Steven is offering a session on if you are considering conversion to Judaism. Which even like is exciting to say, that if you're in a place where that's on your mind. So go to the website. It's Wednesday the 30th. You can hear him speak about it. And the previous Sunday, he's going to be part of, or rather, we are part of One North Side, which is a coalition of faith communities and groups on the north side of Chicago that are working together on an initiative called Bring Chicago Home, which is designed to end homelessness in Chicago. Big, tall order, but one strategy among many, and a lot of different communities are coming together to try to make it happen. If you're interested in that, so the town hall is online. It's at 2 on Sunday, the 27th. And then finally, just a few other things like early April, but I want to plant the seed so that you know about it and you can go look for it. I'm hosting a Havdalah. Mishkan is doing it with Second Unitarians Justice Ministry and also the New Israel Fund and Encounter, hosting an organization called Omdim Biyachad, Standing Together. It also has an Arabic name, which I don't know, but I should learn for the next time I introduce this group. But it's a group of Jews and Palestinians, Israelis, working together to accomplish goal-oriented work in Israel. And try to create more equality and social and climate justice. And so two of the founders are going to be in Chicago. And so we're doing a Havdalah with them to hear more about what they're doing and learn about how we can be part of it. And then there's a bunch of stuff happening for Passover early April, and it's going to be fun. And I can't even believe Passover is now in less than a month, but it is. So keep your eyes peeled for stuff relating to Passover. Okay. All right, transitioning into introducing Jakir. So a few weeks ago, every month when we host these online Shabbats, and this is it's just online. It's just for people wherever you are, no pressure to come out in person, just sort of designed for the home viewer. We have an opportunity to bring people in from outside of Chicago without having to pay a travel fee or putting them up in a hotel. So, thinking about who are great guests that we can bring in. If you have ideas for people, we're all ears. Right now, we're on some level limited to the people who we know who we think are interesting. That said, there are a lot of those people, and I have not exhausted my Rolodex nearly. We were talking, though, thematically about the season that we're in. We just came off of Purim. We're going into Passover. Passover is an agricultural holiday, fundamentally, at its core. It's also a moral and spiritual holiday at its core. And these things are all connected. The land, the spirit, the sense of the moral imperative that comes out of this holiday. Who can speak to this? And so I thought of my dear friend Jakir Manela, who is the CEO of Hazon. Hazon is the Jewish Sustainability Lab. And I actually don't want to say too much more about him or about that because you're going to hear about it in our conversation. And it starts with him giving a little brief bio of himself, but it just gets more and more interesting as the conversation unfolds. And so I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. Let's hear it. Hi, Akir.
Hi, Lizzie.
Hi, it's so great to see you.
Yeah, likewise.
I am sorry to hear that your whole family is afflicted with the disease of the season,
Yeah,
the season of the past 2 years. Thank you for talking to me.
of course. Of course. I don't think I'm going to get pulled away by the kids, but I am the healthy parent right now. So,
Oh my God.
holding
Okay.
it down here.
All right. Refuah shlema to your whole fam.
Oh, man, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so you were just reminding me that we met, I didn't even remember exactly where we met along the way. We met at a Jewish farm school training 15 years ago when I was in rabbinical school and I was like the baby rabbi on a Jewish farm school alternative break trip. And you were the educator at Pearlstone.
Yeah, it was probably a little bit less than that. I came to Pearlstone about 15 years ago with my partners now and my wife. Today's our 15th anniversary, actually.
I
So
love
we got
that.
married right as we were moving to Pearlstone, got married.
And
And
actually
yeah,
situate us. Where is Pearlstone? What is Pearlstone?
sure.
And as you tell us about you, actually help us understand how Pearlstone fits into this sort of movement of eco-Judaism.
Happy to, and really thank you for the invitation. Really grateful to be here.
Yay.
Jakir Manela, he, him, coming to you from Baltimore, Maryland, Susquehannock, and Piscataway land here. And I entered this work really straight out of college. I went to school up in your neck of the woods in Madison, Wisconsin, and spent some time in Chicago. A lot of friends and loved ones up there, and wanted to make Aliyah to Israel at that point, but felt even more deeply called to make Aliyah to Isabella Freedman Jewish Retreat Center in Connecticut, really holy ground, and the birthplace of this whole movement of Judaism and the earth and agriculture and outdoor education, which in the early aughts, when I got there, 2004, Teva, the sort of oldest Jewish outdoor environmental education program, had only been going for less than a decade, 4 or 5 years. And the Adamah program, which is now sort of this cornerstone flagship Jewish farming and young adult, just transformative experience, was just getting started. And the very first person I met there when I got out of the car that first time was my future wife, Netz Chaya Manela. And we met there. And then Pearlstone is a Jewish retreat center like Isabel Freedman in many ways, just outside of Baltimore. And we're both from the DC area. And Pearlstone was looking to really, wow, this thing going on at Freedman is just incredible. Can we bring that magic to this land, to this community? And they called the folks at Freedman and they said, well, here's some folks that are in your neck of the woods. So we came to Pearlstone about 15 years ago to start a farm and to start a Jewish outdoor environmental education program. And that's how I got started there. I believe it was 2 or 3 years later that my memory of us meeting Lizzie is there's like a 2-foot snowstorm, and you and others were like snowed in this training, learning about how we're going to run these awesome trips, alternative breaks for Hillel students, and I came down to say hi. So there's been a lot of amazing groups that have come through Pearlstone, and then after me doing starting the farm and running all the Jewish farming programs and outdoor ed programs for a number of years, got a big opportunity to become the executive director at Pearlstone. That was about a decade ago. And so over the past decade, Pearlstone's really grown a lot as a retreat center, as a farm, as a Jewish education center, serving the Mid-Atlantic region and the country, and actually people from all around the world, because BWI Airport is like a major hub. So we get a lot of people coming from all over the place, Jewish groups and a lot of non-Jewish groups as well. And so I had a chance to lead an amazing group of staff and board and really have an amazing impact. We now impact over pre-COVID 22,000 people every year in immersive retreats and Jewish outdoor education, hands-on organic farming and ecosystem restoration, and community sustainability initiatives like off-site working with particularly Jewish institutions to lower their carbon footprint. And that's why it was just made a lot of sense for me to be on the Hazon board for those years. And Hazon is the largest faith-based environmental organization in the country, working particularly within the Jewish community.
Jewish, not Jewish? It's
Yeah,
both? Not just the
yeah,
biggest Jewish
yeah,
sustainability organization. What?
yeah, yeah. There's a wrinkle to this where like there are some big umbrella interfaith groups that are separate entities than their local chapters, but Hazon really is as its own coherent entity, and that was before this merger. So Hazon has really led the Jewish environmental movement now for many years. Itself merged with Isabella Freedman Jewish Retreat Center about 8 years ago, and I joined the Hazon board right after that merger. and have been part of guiding Hazon over the last number of years as a board member. And now that the tremendous one-of-a-kind visionary founder of Hazon, Nigel Savage, has decided to move on to next chapter in his journey, I've been asked to and have the great honor of leading Hazon and Pearlstone forward as these two organizations merge, really creating even more so a major national Jewish umbrella organization leading the Jewish environmental movement. And the mission is to lead a transformative movement, deeply weaving sustainability into the fabric of Jewish life in order to create a healthier, more sustainable, and more equitable world for all. So that's about culture change and systemic change.
Amen.
Kenti Elanu, Bimharava Yamenu, like speedily in our days, right? And so we're about culture change and systemic change through immersive retreats, Jewish outdoor food farming and environmental education, and climate action. So that's what we're trying to do at Pearlstone, what we're trying to do at Isabel Friedman, what we're trying to do across the country with Hazon, and really just honored to be here with you to talk more about it.
That's incredible. And that's an incredibly daunting, a daunting prospect. Be in charge of the largest movement of any faith-based organization doing environmental climate action and sustainability.
There are many other faith leaders in every faith tradition. We're not trying to say we're running the whole faith world. I really have met some amazing leaders when I was in Glasgow, Scotland, for the United Nations Climate Change Conference in November. Really, Lizzie, it's just humbling to be in the room with like 50 or more faith leaders from all over the world, representing every possible tradition. Amazingly, I was the only Jewish representative. There was a whole Israeli delegation, which was awesome. But in terms of Jewish leadership, it was important to be there. And there's tremendous work happening in faith communities around the world, and we're part of that movement.
That's so important. That's so important. I'm so glad you were there. You were basically representing the American Jewish community.
Yeah, and it was, wow. Not trying to speak for all American Jews. I find that there are some disagreements amongst the American Jewish community. So I didn't want to pretend that this is what everyone agrees on. But as an organization and as a movement that is really mobilizing Jews of all different kinds, all different ages, to connect to the natural world, to fall in love with our home on planet Earth, and then do something about it, that I can speak to, that like growing movement. And so that's what I was trying to bring in that space. And it was profound. There's an amazing quote by this guy named Gus Speth, who was a founder of the World Resources Institute and World Wildlife Fund, major sort of international environmentalist. And he said, I used to think that the biggest environmental problems, were biodiversity and pollution and climate change. And I thought that 30 years of science and advocacy would change it. And I was wrong. The greatest problems are greed and apathy and selfishness. And for that, we need a cultural and spiritual transformation and revolution. And that's the room in Glasgow where, like, out in the major world leaders summit, they're talking, what's the policy change? But without the cultural, ethical, spiritual revolution, we're not going to get there. And that's like the part of the movement that we're invested in.
Oof. I mean, I think it's so important to remember that, because those of us, sort of who don't run multinational corporations in the position to make policy changes that, have far-reaching, wide-reaching effects. We're like recycling in our house or buying a hybrid car, and we can think to ourselves, what am I really doing? What change am I really part of? Let's be honest. Like, there's just one little me, and maybe there are lots of little me's, but, at the end of the day, all of this, these systems wide, that like, what am I going to do? And I think it's so important to be reminded that actually, like, the transformation of heart that is also individual becomes cultural, becomes national, and that without that, nothing's going to change.
Yeah, we have to be able to go inside and like face the spiritual sort of part of ourselves, or the culture sort of responsibility that we each have in building culture, hold our own place and responsibility, and have faith that others are doing the same, but also link arms and mobilize and take action on a personal, a household, a communal, an institutional, and a societal level. And that, yes, that can feel daunting, but that's what my favorite line easily in the Purim Megillah is when Mordecai says, "Hey, this is who knows? Maybe this is why you're here." It's talking to Esther.
That's
And
right.
it's maybe feels a little bit arrogant for us to say, well, we've been chosen for this moment. Even if you don't feel that way, we are the ones that are on planet Earth now in this moment that
That's
get
right.
to be a part of the great turning, the great change in our society that needs to happen. Again, culturally, spiritually, and politically, and economically. And we're here. We can do it. We can do it.
Oh man, I needed this. I needed this. I needed this conversation with you. I'm curious to know who you turn to when you need, when you're having moments of not feeling like the inspiring change maker that you are called to be most of the time. Hold on to that question.
Okay.
Hold on to
Okay.
that question, because something, as we talk about sort of the relationship between the individual, sort of the tribe or the faith group or whatever, and the society. So it makes me think of Shemitah, the year that we're in. And, we've talked about it here and there, but honestly, as an urban community in Chicago, we don't have our own building. We don't have a lawn that we can let lay fallow for the year. So some of the like agricultural implications of Shemitah, of course, like letting the land lay fallow and, debt remission, a lot of that stuff we haven't been able to operationalize like on a community level, but we've like talked about it a little bit here and there. You've been both part of a Jewish farm, like literal farming, but also are now talking about sort of systems level shifts. I wonder how you're thinking about Shemitah, as something that can have relevance to, people in Chicago or anywhere in the country where they're not farming.
Yeah. Yeah, I've thought a little bit about Shemitah over the years. Shemitah is a big foundation of this movement because it really holds in the same way. If you think about Shabbat as such an anchor in Jewish life, Shemitah is Shabbat exponentially, multiplied. Both because
At scale.
Right, exactly, Shabbat at scale, and has such a kind of a radical social and environmental impact to forgive all debt every 7 years, to release all land every 7 years, really has a powerful potential. And it's radical if there's all kinds of loopholes to avoid actually facing what it would mean for us. So I think it's one of the deepest teachings, not just in our movement of Judaism and sustainability, climate, and justice, but really actually one of the most deepest teachings in Torah Bichlal in general. And one thing I taught a session on Shemitah before Shemitah even in 2020 saying, actually Shemitah came early this time. Not that COVID represents Shemitah, but the level of disruption and paradigm shift that the world went through on a dime in many ways. Obviously, in a way that's very tragic and a lot of suffering, but that's the level of change that Shemitah kind of represents, and the way that we saw this outpouring of people like sharing food, the moratorium on evictions. I think that's actually a way to think about Shemitah in like right now sort of parlance. The potential to forgive student debt, Shemitah. Like these are ways that Shemitah consciousness, or as a teacher of mine, Yigal Deutscher, I don't know if you know Yigal out in California, but he talks about sabbatical culture. How do we take the principles of this work and see it manifest in our world today? So things like, a moratorium on evictions or student debt forgiveness, or just when we think about food policy, right? Like the Farm Bill is actually something like Shemitah, if you think about Shemitah as a multi-year sort of food systems policy setup. That's what the Farm Bill does for us as a country. And food policy and urban agriculture policy in Chicago, in cities around the country, really set up an opportunity that we either take or we miss to create societies where Shemitah is possible. Like, what would it mean for us to create a society where food access and justice and relationship to economy and land is set up that we have the ability, the opportunity to really create those levels of justice and community, every 7 years. But just like Shabbat, you don't just like get to Friday afternoon and look, it's Shabbat. You have to have a whole sort of rhythm Same thing for Shemitah. Like, how do we build over the course of 6 years to make that kind of society possible? And, I think COVID actually shows us that radical change is not just possible, it's necessary in the world that we live in.
One of the things that I was most it was like hardest for me to believe and also so amazed by was basically in the space of a month, when air travel had basically tanked and like nobody was flying and nobody was traveling. And my friends in LA were like, I can see the sky, and in like,
Yeah.
and it turned out that like globally, carbon emissions were I don't know what it was. It was some insane percent. It wasn't like 15% or 20%. It was like, the numbers went completely the opposite direction. It was like, oh my God, we have what we need to do to reduce carbon emissions. We can do it.
Yeah.
And then the second it became possible to return to status quo pre-COVID, more people are traveling now than they were before, and it's so interesting because like I know people who work in the airline industry, they were terrified, I mean, it's so many. And like that there's the fear and the loss and the grief that goes along, of everyday people whose lives are invested in the systems as they currently exist. It's scary to actually think of doing what we need to do to create the world we need to create.
Yeah.
On a level.
I have two books I've read recently, which I highly want to recommend in this topic. So one is a Jewish book, Jonathan Safran Foer, We Are the Weather.
Oh my God. Oh yes. Right? So say more. Yeah.
Well, it's such a poignant voice of an American Jewish millennial somewhere, right? Like grappling with, again, like the moral, personal, spiritual crisis in facing what this means, the climate crisis, and like particularly in an American Jewish, like descendant of Holocaust survivor, just like the cultural paradigm and milieu that this sort of resonates in, and it's so deep and moving. And I would say it's a hard read, but it's very moving. It's very touching. And then on a very different and much more recent level, there's a book that just came out not too long ago called The Ministry for the Future by Kim Stanley Robinson. This is a sci-fi, not really sci-fi because it's like very predictive. Kim Stanley Robinson is the author. It's basically like 2025, 2030 through 2060. What might happen in terms of climate? Some of it's really hard. Generally, it's very hopeful. And when you talk about like what would it take for us to create that society, whether it's a Shemitah society or a livable climate, livable future, this book, it's a novel, so it's a good read, and it really sort of lays out like what could this mean for us, and it really sort of calls upon us to be like, well, we actually really have to confront what does money mean, what's the point of our society, how do we want to live together, and it's a powerful book. So I want to share those in light of what you're saying here. Really two good books.
Thank you. I mean, let's talk about the Jewish calendar a little bit, because the Jewish calendar, I once learned like there are three levels the Jewish calendar operates on. One is agricultural, one is moral, and one is like sort of like almost whatever you want to do with it, sort of like spiritual, symbolic, and so for some holidays that might have started out as strictly agricultural, like the different chagim, which are based on, like Sukkot is about the ingathering of produce, and, Passover about like spring seedlings. So they might have started out as agricultural and they sort of then become more spiritual, symbolic. But I wonder if you could sort of situate us on the calendar right now where we are. We just finished Purim. We're heading into Passover. It has agricultural implications, but also maybe sort of spiritual, symbolic, definitely moral, spiritual, symbolic, and to bring some of what you're thinking about with the holidays and the calendar forward.
Thank you, Lizzie. The calendar is such a profound tool and experience for us to live within, such a gift, such a blessing. I think about, we're just in the aftermath of Purim now. And Purim is such a deep, experience of, is it a children's holiday? Is it just sort of?
I'm pretty sure I've decided this year it's not a children's holiday. Like the only reason why we have kids dress up is to get them to the place where they can grapple with the really challenging story that is totally an adult story.
Yeah. I think it's right. There's totally that like entry level sort of, right? It's safe, it's fun, it's cute, and it's really deep, really profound. And I've been thinking a lot about it lately this year, as this is the first story in exile. This is the story of Jews living in the diaspora and confronting unique challenges and opportunities that happen in that context. And it's kind of messy, right? And that is happening in the seasonal context of early spring. It's happening just a few months after Hanukkah. Hanukkah and Purim are often sort of thought of together in this, the cheap line is they tried to kill us, we won, let's eat. So like that genre. But there's a deep
Passover too, right?
Passover, right? It's all. I mean, a lot of highlights, right? So there's that arc between Hanukkah and Purim. Purim is like just early spring. It's a little bit after Tu B'Shvat when the first blooms start to come, but it's this feeling of spring fever, like starting to feel like you can see it. I know Chicago is a little bit colder than we are in Baltimore, but you probably still have some version.
Winter's over. It keeps being, cold and then warm, and then it gets cold again.
Totally, we do that too. When I went to school in Madison, it would be like when it's like 45 degrees, 50 degrees in April or May. People are like, it's shorts and no shirt outside. Like we're treating it like summertime. So the early spring, really like spring fever, has that impulse, that energy that creates this almost sense of wildness in Purim. And by the time we get to Passover, to Pesach, it's the barley harvest. There's a much, I think I want to say more formal. There's like, we have now sort of clarity moving out of slavery and into freedom, into Egypt, going into the desert. And there's an arc that goes through where spring now is this like, as yet sort of still not emergent. We haven't seen the seed sort of break the surface of the earth yet, but you can feel the anticipation rising, and you still feel some of that Purim energy. And Passover, already actually harvesting things. And a friend said to me the other day, Lizzie, that the level of climate crisis that we're feeling and seeing now, scientists are sort of saying is clear in front of us. We actually now need to start thinking about, in the paradigm of Pesach, that we're going out into the desert and we're entering a generation of uncertainty and challenge. What's the level of resilience that we need to build for ourselves individually and communally and as a society to go into a period of challenge and uncertainty? And I think that sort of level of what Pesach demands of us, of freedom and clarity, but also like a certain level of resilience and preparedness, is a deep challenge that I'm going to be thinking about. I need a month to like prepare for that, to come out of the energy of Purim and sort of like prepare myself for that energy with Pesach.
That's really interesting, because part of the Purim story that I think is most uncomfortable, especially for comfortable American Jews, is the part where not only do we resist genocide, but we actually we take revenge. We go from from a totally appropriate reaction mode, which is self-defense, to a to a resistance, which is beyond resistance, which we look at and we go, no, we don't want to be like those Jews. Like we imagine ourselves maybe more moderate, more like we would have made different choices and it wouldn't have ended up so badly for our neighbors. And we could have felt like we just defended ourselves. That's all.
This is like Hanukkah, right? Like, oh, it's Hanukkah, light the candles. No, it's actually like the Maccabees were murdering the assimilated Jews.
Right.
Like, that's what the Maccabees were.
Yes. And so like with Passover, I feel like you get, the opportunity to think sort of like in the way that you're thinking, which is, okay, we've got a month of a lead up toward this holiday, which is, it's premised on the same idea that, sort of like, we're an oppressed minority. Mm-hmm. We are living in a world in which we are not safe. How are we going to create a world in which not only we are safe, but the Erev Rav, the people with us and around us, are safe with us? right? And that we, sort of move into a new reality, promised land, and we can envision it, we can see it, and we're moving that direction, and we're planning for it, and that like this month leading into Passover really has the opportunity to be sort of thinking along the lines that you're describing. So it's not just about like cleaning out my house from all the little crumbly crumbs, but like, what does that symbolize if we're talking about moving into a period of uncertainty? That's like the wilderness of the new climate reality.
Yeah. And in this moment, we're also, we think, preparing to like, now we're going to enter the next chapter of COVID or post-COVID, or like, what is the new normal, the new reality? How do we prepare ourselves to be back in public space again? I know there's a spectrum of how people participate in this, but the world is evolving dynamically now. Obviously, we see tragic, horrific, violence happening. What's the new international order that's developing? Like, there's a bigger series of changes that have just unfolded sort of nonstop over the last few years that just, again, gives a sense of like, we're unmoored. We're not, we've sort of left the dock, and we're sailing into an uncharted waters here.
Indeed we are. So I guess I'll come back now to the question I started to ask you earlier, and with this we'll close, which is, where do you turn for hope and inspiration and the motivation to keep doing what you do, given all of the reasons why one might feel despair in the face of the future and that uncharted territory?
Well, Lizzie, I do want to tell you, like, seeing your face and being in chavruta with you and dialogue with you, hearing from you is like, I really cherish our relationship and your teachings. You are a rabbi for me and for many others, and the teachings, the friendship, the support that you provide for me and for the Mishkan community and for so many is so special. So I really want to thank you and send you love through this screen here.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, and friends and community and teaching, so necessary for the soul. My family, my kids are keeping me grounded and focused on how am I supporting these precious 4 boys we have, ages 4 to 14. How am I supporting them and preparing them for what they're going to face? And so I try to keep it really like present, right? Where am I today? What's in front of me right now? How do I give love and focus and presence to this individual, to this human, to this tree, to this sunset, being present, And then I also have the great blessing of being in this role where it's like, okay, here we are. What are we going to do about it here? Right. So I want to close by sharing this big new initiative that's not even public yet, but for you, for Mishkan, we want you to know about it and be excited about this. Coming actually to Chicago will be a big moment of releasing this in the fall at the GA, which will be in Chicago this year.
Great.
The General Assembly of the Jewish Federations of North America, which is when we're going to be publicly launching this thing called the Jewish Climate Leadership Coalition. So leading up to this, I was talking about this UN conference climate that I went to.
Yeah.
So leading up to, during the time I was there, and then afterwards, as you might imagine, Hazon heard from a lot of people. What are we going to do? What should we do? And some of those entities were local and some were national. And so in my new role, which I've just been in like 6 months here, I took the opportunity to reach out to basically the big national umbrella Jewish organizations, Jewish Federations of North America and the JCC Association and the movements, the URJ, and big Jewish national organizations. And all these folks are signed on now to this coalition, establishing through a founding statement, this is a critical Jewish issue. We have to do something. And more importantly, we're going to take action. So we're convening a national leadership roundtable with liaisons from each of these national groups. And over the next few months, they're creating their own climate action plans, which they're going to release to the public this fall. Wow. And at that point, you'll be able to see the climate action plans of these major Jewish organizations. And critically, we're then going to say, everyone, not just Jews, but every Jewish organization we're targeting needs to create our own climate action plan. How are we going to cut our emissions in half by the next, in the next Shemitah cycle, or whatever the goals are for every Jewish organization? We're not telling you what your climate action plan should be, but we can all do something. And I hope that when we get there this fall, I trust that, Mishkan and many others in Chicago and around the world will say, yes, it's time to do that. And our role at Hazon is going to be convening, facilitating, providing resources, providing support, guidance on how to do this work, and really saying, everybody get on board. We can do this. We got to make a plan. We got to make progress year over year. And other faith communities are making that progress too. So the combination of sort of like the love, the friendship, the family, and the action that we can take together gives me a lot of hope. So
that's so powerful, Jakir. You know, it's funny because I feel like so there's sometimes some hand wringing within the Jewish people about the fact that we're also fragmented at this point. You know, it used to be that we could agree on things. You know, I don't know. That's maybe like
right.
some revisionist history,
myth, right?
You know, some revisionist history. But like, what we could agree that we needed to support and defend Soviet Jews. Like, we could agree that we needed to support and defend Israel. We could agree, and that like some of those assumptions are really no longer true anymore. You know, because just times have changed. But it seems like this is an issue that we can all actually get behind and should get behind with an immense amount of force and bring all of our force to it.
Amen. V'chol me'odecha, we say in the Shema, right? With all your heart, with all your mind, and with all your might. And it's a moment where it merits that. And there's going to be all kinds of subgroups and architecture. We're going to create a whole movement for it. And just grateful to be walking by your side and everybody at Mishkan along this path. So thank you. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you. Oh, this was so inspiring. Thanks, Jakir.
Much love. Shabbat shalom.
Much love. Sorry. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did, that conversation. Yeah. Go ahead and put your own thoughts on the issues raised, the many, many issues raised in the chat. And you'll be able to listen to that if you want to. If you want to go back and review any of the things you heard Jakir say, it'll be on our Shabbat replay on our podcast, Contact Chai. I was struck by one of the things he said early on, which is that, in this work that can feel kind of lonely and despondent, like recycling or doing whatever it is that any one person might do, knowing full well that lots of individuals doing a responsible thing still requires a lot more. It still requires a lot more than just each one of us doing our individual thing. And therefore it can feel kind of lonely and kind of, despairing. And I think that's a feeling that's also familiar for people going through illness, certainly chronic illness, when it just sort of feels like, the conditions don't feel like they're changing, and like maybe nobody's listening or paying attention. And so this is just a moment for linking arms, as Jakir described, and when we feel that way, we link arms with other people who might feel similarly, and then together we feel less alone, and we actually also are a force, a bigger force. And I think that's true on, with every issue. And then when it comes to something like, what we do here every night, which is when we pray for healing for ourselves and for each other, we're linking arms, wherever we are across the city, country, globe, even, from wherever we're sitting, we're linking arms and supporting each other and walking with each other. So if there's somebody you're thinking about tonight, maybe somebody in your house, maybe it's you, who needs a prayer, who needs to be held up by those walking with you, proverbially and literally, go ahead and put their name in the chat. And if it is you, so somebody else say, I've got you. I've got you. And we'll all pray for each other's healing.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu L'shalom העמידנו שומרנו לחיים לחיים ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך.
Join us.
השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום והעמידנו שומרנו לחיים לחיים ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך. השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום והעמידנו שומרנו לחיים לחיים.
Amen, amen. Refuah shlema. I'm standing awkwardly so that if you're saying Kaddish for anybody tonight, if you're remembering anybody tonight, you can stand with me. And also, if there's somebody whose name you want to say, go ahead and put them in the chat. It sounds like my children are about to join us, so we're going to be reminded.
Here to the rescue.
All right, Shuda, come. We're going to be quiet just for this one, and then I want you to sing with me for the next prayer. But that Kaddish doesn't have to be sad. Kaddish can be joyful, actually, as we remember the people who have touched our lives. So go ahead and respond with me. Even though I can't hear you, I'll wait for you to respond with me. Yehi zichronam livracha. May all of their memories be blessings. Actually, Henry, will you participate? Come on over. All right, and watch out for the fire, dear Hannah.
Buzz.
All right, come on over, everybody.
Can I have a treat? Are those fire? Can I please have a treat?
Yitgadal v'yitkadash shmei rabbah.
Amen.
Be'alma divrach cherutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael bagala uv'izman kariv v'imru Yehei shmei rabbah mevorach le'olam u'lamei almaya Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh Yithadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal shmei d'kudsha Brichu Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechamata Damiran be'alma v'imru
Amen.
Yehei shlama rabba min shamaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru
Amen.
Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru.
Amen.
May all of their memories be blessings. And we raise a glass. We raise a glass. Y'all, where's your kiddush?
I don't have my kiddos.
Do you want your kiddush?
That's not my kiddos. That's my
All right.
kiddos.
We'll all make Kiddush together. All right. Welcome to the Heidemann Bernstein household, where Shabbat is chaos. Ready? We making Kiddush? Here we go. Yom HaShishi, Vayichulu Hashamayim v'haaretz, v'chol tzevam, Vayichal Elohim b'yom hashvi'i melachto asher asa, Vayishpot b'yom hashvi'i mikol melachto asher asa, Vayavarech Elohim et yom hashvi'i v'yikadesh oto, Ki bo Shabbat mikol melachto asher bara Elohim lasot. Savri.
Clink.
Clink.
Clink. Clink.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri hagafen.
Clink.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, Shabbat kodsho b'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu, zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit, ki hu yom techila lemikra kodesh, zecher letziat Mitzrayim. Kivanu v'acharta ve'otanu kidashta im kol ha'amim v'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu baruch ata Adonai mekadesh hashabbat l'chaim. All right. L'chaim. All right. Let's get in a position where I can hold my guitar and we can sing one last song all together.
Mommy wants this. What's this?
I'll tell you. All right. So moving from Purim into Passover.
Let's wait.
So on Passover, we sing Hallel. And part of Hallel, this collection of psalms that we sing on Passover, on the holidays, and also during the Seder itself, is the coming through a hard place, coming through a narrow place, min hametzar, through the narrowness, and from the narrowness we call out and we say help. We say God, va'anani b'merchavya, and God answers us with great expansiveness, with great possibility. So. I want to invite who from my family is singing Min HaMeitzar with me.
Me.
All right, Judah Lev, come on over.
But I just need to get one of my instruments.
Oh, he's getting an instrument, everybody. Well, I think I'm going to start singing, Judah, and then you can come on over and join me.
I'll do the drums.
Min HaMeitzar karatiya, Anani b'merchavia. Come on over, then you repeat.
I need to see
Min
it.
HaMeitzar karatiya,
We'll do that's my
Anani b'merchavia. Hodu l'Adonai kito, ki le'olam chasdo. Hodu l'Adonai kito, ki le'olam chasdo. Min hametzar karatiya. Very nice. Now your turn. Min hametzar karatiya, Anani b'merchav. Now we sing Hodu. Hodu l'Adonai kito, ki le'olam chasdo. Your turn. Hodu l'Adonai kito, ki le'olam chasdo. Hodu l'Adonai kito, ki le'olam chasdo.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.